I'm really honored to have her here to sort of unpack this together with us, because I think she really has a lot of skills in that way. But I will do a formal introduction of her as well. So she is a seasoned executive coach with over 25 years of coaching leaders. So she works with executives, high potential talent, and startup founders, and probably many, many others as well. She's conducted original research on facilitated mentoring programs in the workplace. She's trained mentors and mentees, and she mentors herself very many people. She's recognized several times for coaching excellence by the International Coach Federation, and she makes a difference by combining creative thinking with innovative signature tools to keep leaders ahead of changing demands. And I can honestly say I've seen that in action. So committed to greater diversity and inclusion, Sheila worked to close the salary gap between genders when the pay equity legislation was first passed in Ontario. More recently, she founded an amazing initiative. She founded and leads Give and Get, a problem-solving group experience that promotes divergent thinking and inclusivity, and I really encourage you to check it out. I think Give and Get is such a valuable and important initiative, and I want to see it really succeed and fly. So with no further ado, I'd like to welcome Sheila. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you.
Great. Amanda, thank you, Amanda, and thank you also. Amanda's asked me to just say a few words, and then I will introduce each fabulous woman on this panel. If you notice that it's a pivotal moment when it comes to women in tech, everyone's nodding their head gently. And I think there are a few reasons for that. I'm going to list just three. I think there are many more. But firstly, Toronto is part of this innovation hub for tech. And there's a lot of capital, there's a lot of employment opportunities, a lot of startups here. And we don't want to waste the moment. And we want to make sure that women aren't on the sidelines and that they play a very pivotal role. So that's firstly. And I think women are saying, we're not going to put up with it anymore. We want to get jobs, and we want to be promoted, and we want our ventures to be financed. Another reason is because we have a gender gap in the tech sector. Just to read off some statistics, as if you don't already know this, women account for just 5% of CEO roles and 13% of executive team positions, while more than half, 53% of tech companies have no female executives. On average, women account for 8% of director roles, while 73% of firms have no women on their boards. We have a problem. And then finally, this I think is the most disturbing. I think if I'd been asked by Amanda and Jibestream to come and talk about or moderate a panel about diversity, even just a few years ago, I would never have thought we'd arrived, but I thought it was sort of like a motherhood issue. Like, you know, everyone agrees. But actually, if you're following current events, you know that a lot of people disagree with it. And there are a lot of haters out there who don't want to see many of us, women and others, succeed, and new immigrants, including new immigrants who come to Canada. So I think really for that reason also, it's a really pressing moment right now, and it's worth unpacking, to use Amanda's word, what inclusion and diversity means. You know, we have a definitional problem. People confuse diversity with inclusion, and they're not the same thing. Diversity is a fact, and by that I mean everyone here, if I had a question and I polled you, many of you would have difference of opinion, and that would be fantastic. You would have your own perspectives. Inclusivity is what we do with bringing people into organizations with different perspectives, having them feel like they belong. That takes design, and it takes a strategy. So today, we're going to have a discussion about diversity, inclusion, and belonging, and how mentoring promotes it for women in tech. And let's be mindful, when we talk about diversity, it isn't just about race, and it's not just about gender. It's also about background, perspective, age, visible and invisible disabilities, sexual preferences, education, and everything. Just tonight, we might be short-forming it to say women. But I think you can equally apply what we're going to hear to many others. All right, so let me introduce everyone here. So first, Leigha Mitchell. and we just met tonight, although we've all had a chance to speak by phone. This is amazing. These bios are incredible. Recently named one of Canada's top developers 30 under 30. Leigha currently works as a back-end developer at ecobee, but loves to write more than just code. Her articles advocating for women in tech have been syndicated by multiple publications and read by over 100,000 people. I've read some of them and I think they're amazing. And it's great to get a voice like yours. She gives talks at local meetups and conferences and teaches code to people of all backgrounds and ages. Considered a mentor to many in the tech industry, she has been a driving force towards empowering women and the promotion of diversity. In her free time, she loves playing video games, enjoying live music, and consuming absurd amounts of sugar. So let's just welcome her with an applause. Thanks, Leigha, for being here. And next comes Sonia Couto. Sonia is a business visionary, strategic leader, and a highly results-driven leader. She is the director of Konverge, that's with a K, if you need to know, Digital Solutions, a custom software development group, and has been with Konverge for 11 years. She's the founder of Menusano, an award-winning tech company, part of Konverge's portfolio of companies, and the director of Field Eagle, an award-winning software product produced by Konverge. Sonia is responsible for product vision, development, and overall growth. As a dedicated member of the tech community, Sonia's goals are to improve our everyday lives with technology. She is an advocate for early breast cancer detection and supports women going through diagnosis. Oh my gosh, you want to have her on your side. Let's give her an applause. Next comes Aisha Addo. Aisha Addo thrives on working to make the world a better place for women. She founded Power to Girls Foundation, and that's a nonprofit dedicated to ensuring girls around the world are provided with the guidance, mentors, and resources that help them identify their true purpose and calling to reach their full potential. Pretty awesome. Aisha is the recipient of the Young Black and Gifted Award for Community Service and has been recognized as a Black Diversity Group role model, one of 100 Black women to watch in Canada. I'm already exhausted reading this. And one of 150 Black women making history in Toronto. Her latest initiative, you may have heard about it, I certainly did, is DriveHER, a ride-sharing service for women by women, and the next step in her journey to continue to empower and also protect women. So let's give her applause. Don't you think? All right, and finally, Heather Gardiner. As CEO and co-founder of Tulkita, Heather helps clients to understand and build strategies and training programs that target, motivate, and empower IT organizations. For the past 15 years, she has partnered with global Fortune 500 companies to help them successfully realize key technology and business objectives through IT optimization, quality assurance, and program management. Heather has built and launched over 25 unique performance and automation practices, which have improved efficiency, rationalized operations, and achieved significant ROI for her customers. Heather has been an active mentor and mentee throughout her career. And let's give her applause. Wow, like I said, a hot panel. So, here's my opening gambit, a question for all of you. And let's just be casual about this. Just when you feel like you want to contribute, just contribute, and then someone else can contribute and all that good stuff. So what's it like being a woman in tech in Toronto right now? Give us a little overview. What is it like? I'm going to pass through the mic to someone else.
Oh, I'm not sure. I mean, it's pretty good. I feel like it's probably the best it's ever been, honestly, with everything that's going on. I recently read this book. It's called The Better Angels of Our Nature, and it basically goes through the history of the world and how horrible everything was, and then it's like, gets up till now, and you're like, wow, there's like no wars, you don't get dragged out of a cave. So like in that sense, I think things are way better and the best that they've ever been, but they obviously have a far way to go, and I'm sure everyone has lots of stuff to say.
I'm comparing to like 11 years ago when I started and now, it's really not that much different. For me personally, I don't think that is for everyone. I just don't see a huge difference. I know that we're talking about it a lot more. Government is putting things in place for women startup led companies, etc. But I think in the sector that I'm in, which is more established companies that have been around for, my company's been around for over 25 years. I think those type of companies and women in leadership in those roles, I don't think that's changed a whole lot yet. It's great that we're talking about it. It's great that there's a lot of startups with being led by women, but I think there's still that traditional large corporation has not changed at all, in my opinion.
Hi everyone. I always say that like the term women in tech is like hot right now. It's it's the word that everyone just throws around. But like I agree with what you said around. It's something that we've started actually having intentional conversations about and things that we want to see changed. But then for someone that is not very technical, that find myself in the tech space, it's still like trying to figure out what the heck is this anyways, right? So it's a work in progress, but I do believe that like having really intentional conversations and having conversations like this about how not only women can speak up and like have their voices heard, but then how can we also change the industry as a whole to reflect us and to reflect the different changes that we go through in our lives. So yeah.
I agree. I think right now in Toronto, it's still a very male-dominated industry right now. I think as a female in it, we are, especially in a leadership position. So if you look at the CEOs and COOs that are in Toronto right now, to be a female we're a rare breed. There are not many that are in there. Those of us that are in there have either slogged along and worked our way through organizations accordingly, or we've started our own. This nice, I'd say the part that I kind of get excited about, and especially with the movement that's happening right now, is the fact that one of the challenges of all who's been, even once you get to a certain level, is collaboration inside of women. Our intuitiveness is motherhood and we're supposed to be collaborative and teamwork and all these things, but to fit in that male-dominated world, we've kind of changed that. And what I'm finding in Toronto right now is this younger group that's coming up, they're starting to do those things that we've worked so hard to try to do, and I'm starting to see the grassroots starting. And I see in like 5 years, that might actually be at the executive level, where right now, that's still not there in the Toronto space.
And you can hear me if I talk about a mic, yeah? Okay. So what you're speaking to then is collaboration.
Yeah, the collaboration. I mean, part of women in tech, when we talk about it, is it's that collaboration. We talk about inclusive. You'll bear with me. Not enough caffeine today, clearly, or it's actually worn off. But diversity and inclusion. Part of that is doing certain values and doing certain actions. Collaboration. It's not that they're my competitor, they're my enemy. It's actually, being collaborative in those things. And I'm starting to, it's kind of nice for the old people like me. I'm no longer following that under 30 group. I'm now in that, I'm a couple decades over that now. But
welcome to the other side.
I know. Well, it's funny, someone said to me that when I hit 41, which has been a few years, no longer can you be in that 40 under 40 groups. Now you have to be 50 under 50. But it's, there's, again, this older group, it's something that we've wanted for so long, is that collaboration. And we've fought, we've tried to have it, but we've also had to, I hate to say it, be the bitch in the room at times and take on these personalities and things that have stopped us from being able to collaborate with each other. And we're going to talk about mentorship and, getting a female mentor. When I was back in my 20s, I would have loved some female mentors now that, are out there doing it. I would have loved them when I was 20, but that wasn't, even 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that wasn't part of the culture.
Yeah. You can keep the mic and we'll go this way.
Okay.
So let's put on the heat a little. I know it's hot in this room.
Put it up even higher, because I just want to get something out in the room. My question has to do with discrimination and bias. Like, you know, we can, like, it's just something that people who haven't really experienced it just imagine what that might be like. So my question is, what is the discrimination and bias that you guys have either experienced or observed as women in tech, in the sector? Pick one.
I was going to say, so for myself, I'm very lucky. I was born in Canada. I have great education. I've had a lot of opportunities in my life, and that. Yet, I will admit, I've experienced it through being a woman, playing in some of the male, dominated space in the consulting world. So I spent, 7 years of my career, in one of the big 5 consulting firms. That is a very male-dominated area, and going out to drink with the boys and going out to the strip joint and the parties and that stuff, that was all part of what that culture was. But because of my background, I've had to be very conscious of my own actions. And I will admit there's been probably times that I don't know that I have discriminated or not included as I should have. It's something as I've gotten older and gotten into some of my leadership roles, it's a thing that I've had to be very conscious of taking what my actions are.
We'll get there.
And then going there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm just gonna answer all my questions.
Wow, where do I start?
Yes.
Right? I think my favorite. There's no. I think for me, visibly a person of color. I am young. I am a woman that does not necessarily have technical skills, but find myself in the tech space. So I think it ranges depending on the kind of space that you're in. But I'll say my favorite would be being underestimated. I think a lot of times, and I say this all the time to people, that we all have biases. Every time someone walks into a room, consciously or unconsciously, you have a bias. You already have what you've perceived of them, that you think, oh, this is where this person belongs to. And I think for me, I love that because that's my fuel. Underestimate me. Tell me all the things that I cannot do because I'm Black, because I'm a woman, because I'm young. Ask me all of the ridiculous questions that you've put up around my gender, my sexuality, and all of those things. And I'll use that to prove to you why you need to check your bias. And I think for me, I personally as well, walking into spaces and understanding that, yeah, I will be discriminated against, but then it's also how am I as a person checking my biases towards people, right? So it's a two-way street. Discrimination, unfortunately, it hasn't been something that we talk a lot about. And I love the fact that you mentioned even around diversity and inclusion not being the same thing. A lot of times when folks talk about diverse, oh my God, yes, we're diverse. We have that one Black person in the office that everyone loves, that we can go to and ask her about her hair and all of these things. But that's not what she's there for, So it's really important for me to go into spaces where I don't have to answer certain questions. I don't want to have to talk about my hair. That's not why I'm here. I don't want to hear that Black joke that you heard on BuzzFeed. I don't want to talk about that. It's not funny. And this weekend, I actually went to San Francisco for an all-Black conference. And I remember telling a friend, I'm like, you know what? Do you know how refreshing it is to go to a conference and not have to be asked about your hair? And I'm like, no, nobody's gonna come and, oh my God, is that yours? And try to put your hand in it. No, because it was just so refreshing. And I don't see that here. A lot of times you go to conferences and everyone will come and talk, and they'll talk about diversity and they'll talk about inclusion, and then they'll leave and go back to their offices, and it's the exact same thing. So I don't want to get ahead of myself. But yeah.
I'm gonna follow that. So I mean, I'm in tech, but a lot of the industries that I service are very male dominated. So oil, gas, mining are the big industries that I'm in. And one of the challenges, or on my list, the one I think is being questioned all the time. It's like, I know what I'm talking about. Like, I'm in this position for a reason without having to sound like a bitch, right? But you question everything that I tell you. So I'll give an example. Yeah, like I was dealing with a multinational mining company and had to go to Europe, meet with them, only woman in the room, bunch of miners, and like trying to get a project back on track because they messed it up, really, and like questioning me every step of the way. And then it really, like, you have no option, and I hate to say this, but to kind of be that bitch and be like, okay, you know what, like, we need to take a step back now, and you need to listen to me, and you need to listen to my suggestions, and you need to take them into consideration because this is going to make things better. And the minute you do that and you create that shift, then whoa, oh, she's that B word, right? But then they realize that you do know what you're doing. So it goes from questioning you to, oh, she's a B, so now this is where we are.
Yeah.
That's mine.
Yeah, so as a developer, yeah, it's a lot of just being the only girl in the room. But I find it's the subtle things that get me the most. Like the word guys, like I use that all the time too, but it's when it's like the guys on this team, and I'm like, but I'm on that team, like I'm not a dude. And then it'll be something as simple as going to a tech conference, like a developer conference. It's literally all developers, and I'll go up to a booth and someone will be like, so what do you do? And I'm like, I'm a developer. And they'll be like, wow, that's really great. And I'm like, why else would I be here? Like, it's just so weird to me that they don't expect me to first be a developer and then they act like I'm a chimp who knows sign language. Like, it's so crazy and like impressive that I can write code when like it's not. Like, I have the same brains as all of you. So I feel like it's those little things that kind of get me, or like when you go somewhere and they're like, oh, are you a student, or like, are you in marketing? And I'm like, no, I'm a developer. Or like, yeah, I'm sure you guys get the same thing. And you're like, no, I'm the CEO of the damn company, like, respect me. It's like those really passive things, I think, that get me the most. But I've been lucky to work at like ecobee and the hub on my last company were really inclusive. So like within the company, at least I was very sheltered, but it's externally those little things, you know?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
So I want to move now to failing up. Men who misbehave at work in tech that we read about in the newspapers, and they quietly go off with packages of millions of dollars.
Google.
Right? You may have some Googlers here. I'm sure they're very aware of it. So they get these payouts and they get protected by the company, and then sometimes journalists find out about it, and then it's on the front page news. So I've been dying to ask this of a panel of women in tech. What does that communicate to you? I imagine you might be hearing this slightly differently than me, who I coach in tech, but I'm not of tech, right?
Whoever wants it.
I'm trying to think of what angle to take on this.
Yeah.
For me, that's weird in the startup industry because people get laid off from companies. Example, my last company just laid off most of their staff, and they did get severance, but some people get laid off with like no or little severance for actually doing the work. So just in an industry where like Google probably wouldn't lay off half its company and like not pay them, but I mean in an industry like this when people get laid off or screwed over all the time and don't get severance, and then someone gets fired for being inappropriate or whatever it is that they do, and they get a ton of money when like people are struggling, or you know the certain people in certain departments, or depending where they are in the company, are making a lot less. So in terms of how they're distributing their money, like that seems bananas to me. But that's
I don't know my take on this, but I think I'm just gonna compare, like, you know, what you said, the men in the big companies that do get these packages. If you compare to like a story like Melissa Mayer at Yahoo and her whole like if you compare the stories, I'm just gonna get to this point. If you compare the stories between, the males getting these packages and her story and what she was doing at Yahoo and how they kind of, presented her as came in and was a complete failure in a way, right? If you compare those stories, they're not exactly, the men are more protected, in my opinion. Like, I think they threw her under the bus. They butchered her reputation a little bit and made her seem like she made the company fail. Meanwhile, if you really read into it, she actually went in and she really saved that company, and she did a lot to bring them from where they were. I don't think she got enough credit for that.
On the same vein, like I'm gonna even use the lady from Uber as an example that got thrown under the bus because she spoke about her experiences. I think the tech space itself.
Does everybody know about what you're referencing?
Does everyone know about what I'm
Explanation?
referencing?
No,
Actually?
little explanation.
Okay, so there was the lady that came out. I don't remember her name specifically, but she came out sharing her experience with assault and violence at Uber, and also talked about like talking to HR about it several times and it just being passed over, and she got to a point where she's like, enough is enough, and she got dragged throughout. Like she got dragged, and you see a company like Google that pays off the employee and hushes it up, and then it goes into the media and they're like, oh yeah, we already got rid of them, but you got rid of them with a big chunk of money just to say, hey, we're with you, but here, take this money and just go and start a new startup. And that's literally how, I feel like that's just how the tech space itself works. People will leave hushly and start new startups, and then it would just perpetuate the exact same cycles over and over and over and over and over again. So it's very interesting because not only are we saying that women's voices and women's experiences do not matter, but we're saying to the younger ones that you can do something really bad and vile and you get paid to get away with it. That's what we're saying to young boys. That's actually the message that we're sending across. And we're saying to young girls, hey, you can fight and fight and fight and fight, but they're never gonna believe you. And I think it's time that we just stop being comfortable with those narratives and just stop.
You're exactly right. The challenge I find is it's happening in the startups. So a lot of the stories that you're hearing aren't happening in the last 2 years. So the Uber story started when they were a startup. And what's happening is that there aren't a lot of these startups, call it the Silicon effect or whatever you want to call it. What's happening is these companies are starting up, they have no HR, there's no control, it's a cowboy kind of piece. And what's ending up happening is these events are the media isn't going to pay attention to the small startup, the 10 people there. But when it is a Google, when it is an Uber, the media is now suddenly hearing those stories. And that's where all of a sudden they have the chunks of money to pay it off. Unfortunately, the stories, I can tell you 3 stories out of startups that I know of that happened. One of them got pushed away, out of the organization. 2 of them got some good chunks of money out of it. I can tell you a large story here in Canada that, a very high-ranking executive in an organized, a common household names organization, was having an affair with one of his people underneath him. She lost her job, he got promoted, and he ended up getting a severance out of it. It's a reality of it. I hate to say it. Part of it comes back to the startup mentality. I had a conversation with a bunch of CEOs and COOs, and we were talking around, what policies that they have and what they push out around sexual harassment or harassment in general. And I had one of them say, we don't have time for that. If something comes up, we'll deal with it. And I think it's the Silicon effect is that it's actually, women are now stepping up and saying, look, we've got to deal with this now. We have to be putting in the policies in place. We have to be putting it in. We have to be putting in the protections into these startups. And it's not a Silicon trait. And it's got to start in organization, whether that starts in Toronto or starts somewhere, Waterloo, Austin, it's got to start somewhere, and it's got to have the effect back on Silicon, because the big stories I hate to say it, they're not going to stop. They're going to be, at least for another 10 years, there's enough skeletons in some of these closets that are going to be coming out for the next 10 years. And unfortunately, it is a reality. I say that to a room of very, younger people in the room. The thing that I will say is, in the Toronto space, there are a lot of CEOs and CEOs at startups that have started to put it in place. You mentioned Hub as one. Ben and his team have definitely put in the pieces in place. There's people, Simple is another one that brought in great HR people right from the beginning. It's happening in Toronto. It just needs to happen a lot more. And it has to be, organizations like Mars and Communitech and PeerScale and others that are highlighting that they need to be investing time into those HR policies, into the places there. Sorry.
And it's also about keeping them accountable. I
Yes.
feel like that's one of the things that, because Google had a policy around sexual harassment, so they didn't have any tolerance for it, but then they'll pay you. So it's really like, how do we hold these companies accountable to the policies that they actually put into place?
The answer there is have a march and demo that goes on for days.
So what do you see for the two owners here, the CEOs? Is your role as women leaders in tech?
So I said what? Oh, there's the CEOs and then I guess what happened?
What do you see as your role as a woman leader in tech?
Honestly, I'm a very bubbly person, okay? And I bring that into my leadership style. I think I happen to work with a lot of guys. Please, if you know any female developers, please.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
Really. So really having a service that is dedicated specifically to women and having developers that happen to be guys is very interesting, because the conversation is always put yourself in the woman's shoes. Put yourself in your sister's shoes. You have a mom, right? Okay, think like her. And really just having honest conversations about that. I think the very first thing that I talked to my developers about was, listen, you're not a woman, so this might not make sense to you. You might think of all the different ways that this does not make sense, and that's okay. I appreciate that. However, you're still gonna create this thinking about the woman. So all of the women in your family that you admire, think about them when you're creating this, because it's for them. And really getting them to put themselves in that position really caused us to have an amazing relationship, and really actually having really deep conversations around men and how they treat women that are not necessarily technical. And like I said, I'm not a technical person on the team, so imagine not being a technical person and having to talk about your tech stack and all of those things and all of those fancy words that they talk about, that sometimes it just goes right here, and I'm like, okay, bring it back to grade 5 level, talk to me like you're talking to a grade 5 person, and explain it to me. Okay, Aish, we know you don't get this, but this is what we're doing. And I love that, and I appreciate that, because then it doesn't make me feel like, oh yeah, you don't know what you're talking about. It's more, this is the process that we're going through, and how do we sort of include that? And I really and truly also loved working with men on this project, because honestly, different perspective. And now when they have conversations, it changes from, oh, your project to our project, because there's a sense of ownership. Because now they understand that, oh, we're not just creating this, we're creating it for the woman that we know in our life, the sister that we have, the mother that we have, the daughter that we might have. So it's a different conversation. Honestly, yeah, it's a different conversation.
My degree's in English Lit, so I am not a tech. I am self-taught, and I scare my guys a lot of times. But for me as a leader in tech, I think for me, it's been a realization over the last 3 years of who the leader I am and what I want to be. I clearly can now identify who I don't want to be. And it's come back to me understanding my values, my character, and then what motivates me, and making sure that I am lining it up with my team and colleagues in that as well. It's been a big thing, you know. Again, I was one of those people that you work the, you know, almost 20 hours a day kind of stuff and that, and the leadership side and you know, kind of brushing it off on the side. I did brush it off. And yeah, for me, it's kind of trying to be responsible for what I'm doing, make sure that I'm helping the next generation, and I say that, but really even helping myself, and kind of trying to build, you know, myself in the tech space. You know, you've got to have a voice, and that's the big thing for me as a woman right now, is creating my voice. And that's through my values and my character, and sticking to them. I feel at times, there's people in the room that can tell you that, but trying to stick to it.
Absolutely right. I think for me, there's a million thoughts going through my head right now, but like, I run a 25-year-old company, and when I started at this company, it was literally a bro environment where, like, really, bro, are you coming out tonight? And I was the only woman there. So I found that I had to change who I was, my beliefs, and everything I stood for in order to fit in. And I didn't do anything evil or anything like that, but, you know, I wasn't myself, so that I could fit in and I could feel like I belonged. But, you know, the years go by, and here I am running this company now, and I think it's because I went back to, these are my values, this is what I stand for, and you know what, I am smart, and I'm here for a reason, and I know what I'm doing, and I'm fixing all of your mistakes. So, you know what, yeah, so I had to do a lot of like self, you know, you're good, you know what you're doing, don't worry about it. And so now I'm like, I try to do the same with my team, with the startup that we have, that I have. A lot of it has been earning respect because I was in the trenches. I was there until midnight, we were doing the work, we were talking about it, we were collaborating, and I think my team really got to see how I solve problems. And now, you know, today is a perfect example. One of the projects is late, not on budget. My project manager literally came into my office with his hand in his heart. He's like, I don't know what to do, help me. And it was just a matter of going to the blackboard and like, okay, where are you stuck? He's like, here. And I'm like, I just had the solution. I'm like, this is what you gotta do, follow this structure. And then he was like, at the end I was like, whoa, how did you even figure that out? I'm like, experience. I've been there, I've done it. So I think earning respect goes a long way as well. And then making sure that, you know, people that I hire, we're 50-50. Like, we have 50% women, 50% men. I didn't get hired to be the CEO and to run this company. I earned that spot. And so I make sure that when we're hiring, before we hire, that I look at the people internally and see who do I have here that is, forget about gender, who is capable of taking on this role. And I have to be really honest with you, like lately, I've actually been promoting internally, and the company is like at a completely different place now. And I have people I trust in doing things that I didn't even ask for, and I'm like, oh, I love this, this is great. So I think that goes a long way, and you have to keep that culture, and you know, that keep the talent going, and let them know that they're good at what they do, and also mentor them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to say, as a developer, I don't know half the shit that technical people talk about either. So don't feel bad. It's all made up. We don't know what we're saying.
That's great. So how do you or the people around you promote divergent thinking? That too is part of having inclusivity. You know, inviting people to party is one thing, asking them to dance is the cliche about it, is quite another. So how do you draw that out? What do you, and we can hear from some or all of you, whatever.
Okay, in terms of like development, there's a lot of different backgrounds and ways to get it in. So people are self-taught, people do a CS degree, some people have their master's, some people go to boot camps. So in terms of that, it's great to have a team that is really diverse, because someone who went to U of T 10 years ago to do I always mix it up with customer success, CS, computer science, is going to think very differently than someone who did HackerU 2 years ago, because they're going to have more up-to-date knowledge. They're going to maybe both of them know new languages, but they might know a new framework. They might have a different way of thinking. There's also people who either were too intimidated by computer science or couldn't afford to go to university, who then do boot camps later on, either part-time. It's as much as expensive because it's a large chunk, like it is cheaper. A lot of women go through them. They're usually 50, if not more, % female in these boot camps, because we're the ones deciding to go afterwards, because we maybe weren't steered towards computer science in school, but afterwards we're like, this is really cool and I want to do this, so we end up going there. So I think I just read recently, like Apple, Google, all these companies got rid of requesting a computer science degree, and I think that's a super important step, because we are coming from all these different backgrounds. And in Canada alone, isn't it like we need 10 million jobs in 10 years, and you're not going to get it by filtering people through a 4 or 5 year degree program. You want people who care and are passionate, but come from all these different backgrounds. Like if you grew up poor but you worked your butt off, that's the person I want to work with. I want to work with that person who worked their butt off on their own, in their basement, on the computer, to learn development. And I think, I was trying to think, I was at a conference last year, and Trudeau was actually talking about this, and he was talking about immigrants. And he was like, those are the people we want in tech, because they literally worked their butts off and killed themselves to like come to a new country, because they care about their future and their kids' future and the future of everyone. So he's like, those are the people you want in tech, because they can work for it and they care about the future. They're already looking at it. So I think in terms of that, you need to have diverse hiring, either from countries or schools or whatever, because we all have different reasons why we're important.
So I'm an immigrant in this country, after high school I started working right away. I only went and did university like years later, which wasn't that long ago. So I'm self-taught, and I started running a company before I did any university at all. It was just because I put in the work, and I tried, and it worked, and I was smart, and I thought about it, and I put in the work. So when I hire now, I don't even look on a resume at people's education. I look at the work experience. Where have you been, what have you done, and what can you offer to the organization? And I'm really happy to say that we have one person, I believe, that's born in Canada on our team. We have people from Ukraine and India and all over the world, and they all speak different languages and have different cultures and have different things to offer. So when we need to do like a thinking session, and there's always more than 2-3 people in the room, and when you have like these different cultures and different languages and all these people together in one room, what you get out of it is like amazing, right? And things that you never would have thought about, because you have your own way of thinking and someone else contributes to it. And like sometimes we get out of these meetings and it's just like we go in because we're having a problem with a button and we need to figure out where to put this button, and by the time we come out of it, it's like we have a whole new piece of software, a whole new feature, a whole new module to build. But they're really interesting, and it makes work fun too.
That's it. Wow. I think it's also really about being uncomfortable. Most of the time when folks are hiring, they're hiring people that they're comfortable with, because like, oh, I can jive with this person. We went to the same school, you know? And especially in the tech space, that's been sort of like the narrative over the past couple of years. I remember actually when I was in San Francisco, when a Lyft driver was having a conversation with me, and these were his exact words. So people that get into tech, the men that get into tech, are men that were never taught how to interact with women. You know, they were the nerds of the classrooms, they were the geeks that no one wanted to speak to. Sorry, no offense, men. It's not my words, his words. And he made a point that, like, it's really interesting because they're now in these top positions, and the reality is they don't know how to work with other people. You know, they've self-taught themselves a lot of stuff and they've built successful companies. And now we're challenging them to say, hey, you gotta let someone else play with you. Or you gotta let someone else in, and it's hard, right? So we really have to think back to the basics of like really getting uncomfortable. And the process of getting uncomfortable is really and truly bringing people that do not think like you, that do not look like you, that do not sometimes even speak the same language as you. And it's hard because you're challenging someone's personal space. Like that's the reality. It's very hard. Like, we can talk about diversity, we can talk about inclusion, but to actually do it and put it in place is you getting to a state of being uncomfortable. How comfortable are you with being uncomfortable? you know, like it's so hard. So for me, like it always comes back to that. Like, get ready to be uncomfortable, because when you get over that, you see the power of collaboration. You see the power of divergent thinking. You see that's how you go into meetings to fix a button and you come up with a whole software. Like, you know, that's literally how it's done. So just being uncomfortable and being intentional about that. Being intentional about actually wanting that. Because I've been to so many conferences in Toronto alone where we talk about diversity, we talk about inclusion, and they go back to the offices and the same thing.